All right. We're on the air. Welcome, everybody. We are excited today to chat with you about how to get really strong, how to maintain your strength, and how to train appropriately, really for anything. Super important in the sport of CrossFit, but I'd argue that in any strength-related sport, any performance-related sport, this can definitely be a tool that is kind of used, or like a principle used, in order to make sure you have good long-term growth. And there's a lot of other characteristics this builds, which in the title you'll see it's, raising your minimums over your maximums. And it might sound contradictory, but once we get into it, you'll really understand. So we believe that this is a great tool for people within CrossFit to use, and an idea to get your head around for strength, for skill work, honestly, just training in general, because overall it's really about consistency. And you're the more consistent you can be, the better your training is going to pay off. The longer the longer you can hold on to those skills or hold on to your strength. And I think the better you are, I don't know how to word it. The better you will be at expressing said strength or skill, you will be better at expressing it if you approach it with this manner. So yeah, before we get too deep into it, I have our question for the day. This might not ring as it might not be as appropriate when this is released, but it was Amazon Prime Day the past couple days. Sam, did you have any good buys, or did you just anything get your mind? You got an email and you're like, man, I got to get it.
It's
Any
so
diapers?
funny though. No, we get diapers at Costco. But literally the only thing I looked up on Amazon, which was yesterday, because I was like, oh yeah, it's the Prime thing going on right now, so I might as well look. I was looking for Element electrolyte packs, which are super good and tasty, but they're so expensive for salt that's flavored. So I used to buy them, and then my wife kind of got them a case because I'm pretty frugal, but not in that sense. And so then I changed my mind, and so I don't buy them anymore. But I went on there and I was like, oh, well, if they're like half off, I'll buy some. And they weren't. They were the same price, like $45 for 30 days worth. So I was like, oh, forget it. I'm not buying anything. So I didn't buy anything. I don't know if my wife bought anything. She might have to ask her. But yeah, I didn't buy anything. Did you buy anything?
I did. I'm trying to think now. You reminded me. I actually do have an electrolyte because I wanted Element as well, but I got another one that's a little cheaper. Maybe I'll send it to you so you can see, because it's similar. It's like sweetened with stevia, mainly salt, potassium.
Oh, nice. Yeah, send it to me.
It's good. We got my wife an office chair because she has a standing desk, nice. But it's one I built years ago, so it's not it's not adjustable. So she can only stand. So it's like they call it like a drafting chair desk, like an architect chair. So it's taller. So the dimensions work out.
Nice.
I reordered my spade, drink spade.
Oh, nice. You can buy spade on Amazon?
Yeah, it's been on Amazon for, I guess, a month now.
I know that. Awesome. Shout out to Jake.
Yeah, it's great. Great drink. Dang, there was another item on there and I cannot remember. It'll come to me. Oh, and I got a new rangefinder.
Oh, nice.
So, not for golf, but
I was gonna say.
I mean, yeah. I'll use it for golf, but it's for detecting items that are farther away that are in nature. Well, yeah, I guess anyone can comment and guess. So yeah, got a rangefinder, a Sig Sauer rangefinder, if that helps anybody.
Oh, nice.
It was a great deal.
I wasn't asking you about like ammo or anything, so
I don't know. No, you can't. I don't think you can get it on Amazon now.
Yeah.
No, I don't have enough of that, but my wife would get on me if I did, because she thinks we have enough.
Of course.
But luckily I got some friends and family that have a lot too. But yeah, she's super excited about her chair. So yeah, and she was like, do you need a chair? And I'm just like, no, I'll keep the older one for a while, because I'm trying to make the purchase worthwhile when I get it. So the longer I wait, the more I'll be able, the more she'll allow me to spend, probably, because I'll be like, man, this chair's been killing me. So
exactly.
And good. I can't buy a normal chair. I'm too big for just some Amazon chair. So
no. Oh, good. So, yeah. Well, I'm glad at least one of us really took advantage of it.
Yeah, I was scouring. We were on Amazon together on the app for like 30 minutes, just like there's got to be something we need. And there really wasn't anything. It was, they almost got us, but we had all those things in our cart for probably a few weeks waiting for the day just in case.
Nice.
All right, back to it. Back to minimums over maximums. We want to spend minimally to get the maximum return. That was the link to Amazon Prime Day. All right, so I've got a little a note here that from one of your courses, that your course, coaching the competitor, and this was kind of at the start of your section about minimums over maximums. So I was going to read it. When you aim solely at a new maximum, you move further away from it. When you aim solely at raising your minimums, you move closer to a new maximum. And that's some stoic stuff, so I want you to unpack that.
Yeah. Well, so some context. The first time I came across this idea of focusing on minimums over maximums, I'm fairly certain was from Jim Wendler, who came up with 531. Who's a famous powerlifter, really smart guy, really funny, and I heard either I read or heard him talk about that concept, and I think part of the reason too was that concept is really important for the 531 training program, because one of the reasons why that progression and program is so potent is you're always leaving a lot on the table and you're never really maxing out, which just creates a ton of runway. And with strength training, it's almost a game of long-term consistency, so you can accumulate the load and tonnage you need to actually like make appreciable gains over time. And so you have to create runway, which means you have to leave a lot in the tank week after week after week. Otherwise, you either run into a wall, you'll start failing lifts, you'll get too tired, you might get injured. Just there's so many things that can tip the scale in the wrong direction. So my guess would be that concept probably came out of him, not only in his own training, but also writing and developing 531 and realizing, yeah, you probably should be focusing more on the ground floor versus moving the ground floor closer to the ceiling than trying to move the ceiling up. So heard that a while ago, really resonated, and through my own training and then working with people, you just kind of see that play out where when you're not explicitly focusing on, I need to get this PR another up 20 more pounds or 30 more pounds, it almost inevitably happens where the PRs start to come out of nowhere because you've just been working on the things that actually matter, which is getting stronger, which takes a lot of time and consistent training, staying healthy, super important, and recovering really well. Because in order to express a maximum, your nervous system has to be really fresh and ready in most circumstances. So if you have all those components, then you'll just one day wake up and you'll feel really good, and then you go for a PR and you nail it, and it's like, where did that come from? And so that happens more often than not when you're taking this kind of approach. And I would say unique to CrossFit, it's not a sport of maximums because you're not tested necessarily every year, every stage of the competition with your maximums. There could be a heavy lift, but it's usually in the presence of fatigue, or there's some sort of constraint that's limiting your maximal expression. So a better indicator of performance in the sport is like, how well do you do below your maximums for repetitions, which we sometimes classify as like strength endurance or battery type work. So you do need maximums though. Like you need to be strong enough, but whereas in weightlifting, like your snatch max and your clean and jerk max, or in powerlifting, those numbers actually matter for the sport. That's how you're judged off of the sport. You're not judged for how much work you can do in a 10-minute window and then lift a maximum. It's like you get 3 lifts and you need to hit as heavy as you can. So that's also why this concept is great inside of the sport of CrossFit, because it fits nicely with what we're trying to do inside of the gym, which is be consistent, get stronger, but also merge that with great capacity with that strength. We don't want the strength to outstrip the capacity, because then we'll run into some problems. So that's what this minimus over maximus kind of came from, and why it has applicability to, and not like you said, not just CrossFit. Anybody who's trying to get stronger or improve their strength performance, this is a really important principle for how you want to look at your training.
Yeah. So for like a rudimentary example of what we could be referring to is, like, let's just say, if, for example, your back squat, your 1RM is 405, and let's just say you have 10 training sessions over a year where you are really digging deep for a tough single or close to, or maybe a tough double single. The idea would be accumulating a perfect, really good set at 385 10 of those times. Might be better off than 5 of them you do that, and the other 5 you might fail at 430 or 445, trying to go for a little bit more. So for an example, you were really trying to push the maximum where the training likely didn't call that way. And I guess this kind of opens up, maybe the coach should have adjusted it or whatever. But if you're leading yourself or you're coaching yourself, like, you're digging too deep trying to push the maximum, whereas you could have been having a really quality session, getting better at the back squat, and still getting a really, really, really good tough load or tough rep, and learning from that, and getting better. Or you could just take any other movement, really, like a snatch, or, the closer you are to pushing the maximum, you're going to have failed lifts. You're going to, they won't look as good. Whereas only 10 pounds left might have looked really, really good. And realistically, it's only 10 pounds. So just a little bit of context before we get a little further.
Yeah.
You want to add anything?
Yeah. That's along the lines of what that idea is, which is just to make it real simple, you're wanting to make your 90% look like your 80%. And so one way we do that is through training, progression of training, and building strength, which is going to take time, building efficiency, which does take time, that can come more quickly because it's more neurological. And then also by leaving some on the table, because if we're focusing on raising the ground floor, then we're not trying to push every session to its limit each time. Because you see that a lot, where people are like really grinding reps in their strength training, like consistently, and that's, you just run out of runway. Like, if you're you can make a counter argument that you do need to really push it, you need to grind, but I would say you occasionally need to do that, and you need to do it at the right time. It can't be a reoccurring approach to your training. Otherwise, like I said, you'll run into either a plateau, an injury, burnout, or I already said plateau, so say you stall your lifts, your progress, and the CNS load will influence all the other components that you're trying to get better at too. So it's a matter of like making what was once hard a little bit easier, and just kind of going back and forth, doing that again and again and again. Like, for example, say 225 and the snatch is a tough lift for you. Like, you can hit it, but it's a little sketchy. The goal over the next 4 months is it feels more crisp and smooth without necessarily having to move your ceiling, your maximum, which maybe your max is like 260. It's like, well, you're not touching that, but you're working on making that 225 better. And then in 4 months, when it is better, there's a good chance you've probably moved the top end a little bit. Doesn't mean we have to go test it, but now you're getting better, closer to your ceiling, which is what we want, and you'll recover faster from it, so you can do more in your training.
Yeah, I like that analogy better. Your 1RM's 250. You want your 225 to now look like 205 did. When you hit 205, everyone's like, that looked great. That was easy. Now you want that new, easy, smooth, quick number to be closer to the 1RM.
Yeah,
which kind of leads into.
Real quick. Yeah, like I have a good example. So one of my clients, Sawyer, who might listen to this, if he doesn't, it's okay. So he snatched 245, probably been late 2022. And that was an all-time PR. He's young. He's 23, 24. And then I think he hit it again, maybe 3 or 4 months into 2023. Maybe it was around quarterfinal. I think he hit it again. So he hit it twice. And then he was a little bit sick over the summer. He was traveling. So training was a little inconsistent through the summer, but doing all right. Nothing too crazy. And then into the fall, we had decent training. And then 2024, he competed, did fairly well, all things considered. And then we started our kind of like off-season block in April. And the other day he hit 245 for a double and then just missed the third barely. If he tried again, he might have got it. And then the next week he hit it for another double. And then he went for 250 for a double. And I think he made the 250 for a double. And then the next week was like a dial back week. And I just had him build to like a moderately tough single. And he did 245 again because he felt good. And you look at all those lifts, not only was the technique better, the speed was better, the strength off the floor was better, the lockout was better. And we haven't touched a maximum or anything, but just through the process of getting stronger, working on positions, really dialing in 205 to 225 repetitions in the snatch. As I've allowed him to expose himself to a little bit heavier loading, he's showing that his minimums are rising, where 245 is not his ceiling anymore. It's something he can, well, he haven't hit the 250, so that was a PR, but it just shows that it's becoming like 225 was. And so that was just a great example. We chatted about that. Like, yeah, we're moving the needle in a way that's not what people would anticipate.
Yeah,
you would
not that flashy 1RM test week.
Yeah. No, every once in a while we might do that, but
yeah,
that's not how you move the needle.
Yeah, that's what we're getting right into that. So, good segue. Still, what is strength expression? So we said it a few times, and that will kind of help give probably people a better idea.
It's kind of very broad.
Yeah, so I'll just give context of, let's just say someone does a 405 back squat and it was grindy and they rounded a little bit, but they got it. And then maybe 6 months later, they did it again and it was smooth, perfect positions, and the speed was better. They're expressing that better. And that's kind of what I was getting at. So we won't have we could probably do a couple podcasts on truly what is expression, but they're expressing the weight better. The skill is the back squat and they're doing it better. And you can usually see it in a lot of things, but you can feel it.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's a great example of raising minimums where the load doesn't change, but the execution of the load changes in a positive way. And that's more important in my eyes than the load changing. So I rather the 405 look really solid and crisp than you doing 420. Because if 420 looks the same as 405, that's not as optimal, because you're not becoming more efficient with the movement, which is going to influence the cost of the movement, and there are downstream effects to that. So I like people making it look smooth. Back to Sawyer's example, I want the 245 to look better before he snatches 255 or 265 or something. And that's what we're doing. So yeah, improving strength expression is very important. And I think partially too, just because the costs of the reps are less, like the energetic cost is less because you're more efficient, which in this sport, CrossFit in particular, that's really important. And even if you just train to be strong, that's important too, because if squatting heavy is more efficient, it'll cost you less, which means you'll recover faster. You can probably practice it more frequently. And that's going to help with not only your lean mass gains, but also your top end strength development.
Yeah.
So,
and just training week to week, because, recently you posted, one of the best tips for someone training is leave a little weight on the bar, because you want to be able to progressive overload is, a great tool. So if you're grinding, like you said earlier, there's a time to grind, but if you're grinding all the time, there's no runway. There's no more way to keep improving.
Yeah.
And I've been there. Yeah. Well, even then you can still do it. You just,
Well, but what actually will happen, interestingly, is if you are doing that and then you go on drugs, most often people will have muscle tears because the connective tissue hasn't had time to adapt to the changes in force that are placed on the muscle tissue, because
Hmm.
connective tissue takes a lot longer to adapt than muscle does. And so you see that a lot. People who are using drugs, you'll see muscle tears, strains. So that's something you
Ring
have to
dip,
keep in
peg
mind.
tears.
Yeah,
Ring,
well, maybe, but that
ring dip,
I think
Watergate.
that was, yeah, I think that was more just poor
Yeah,
programming.
I think it was definitely
That was
both, but
ridiculous.
it would happen in a drug-free
Yeah.
environment. Okay. We kind of went over why we need consistency, why it's important, and that's kind of what we just talked about, because you need to add per week, you need to accumulate these good sessions.
Yeah.
If you have, a session, if you're trying to do progressive overload and you do a tough set of 10 and you literally can't add weight for the next 4 weeks, even though the reps are going down, this is a personal example, then it's kind of squashed. So leave a little weight on the bar.
Mhm.
Is a 1RM a good indicator of strength?
Well,
It's kind of double sided, but you wanted to add something?
I was just gonna say, to the consistency piece, to make it simple, being consistent is the most important component of any type of training. So when you are dealing with strength adaptations, where it's easier to run into plateaus or blocks because you're pushing heavy load,
Mm,
in order to stay on track with this cardinal rule of training being consistent, you have to be a bit more uh, respectful of the load, in the sense of leaving some in the tanks. You can keep creating space to progress and build week over week. And like a perfect example of how that can go wrong is when you was that in the fall? I gave you the build a tough set of 10 in the back squat. You did 405, which was a PR, which was wild. But then the rest of the block, because it was supposed to go 10, 8, 6, 4, 2, and the next 4 weeks were a wash because you
I couldn't
maxed
add
it.
weight.
No, of course not. It was a PR. And that's okay because you felt good and you went for it. But that doesn't happen all the time. And we don't want that to. So, like the block you're doing right now, which funny enough is the same
Same thing.
progression, 10, 8, 6, 4, 2, and you did 2 this week. The 10 week, you created space, which I even think I made a note, like, don't blow it
Yeah,
out
you
of the
did.
water so we can build each week. So that's a great example of being respectful of the weight so that you can keep building and keep making progression as the weeks and months go on in your training. But if the oven's hot, it's time to cook. So if you feel good,
Yeah,
you go for it. But that's not going to happen all the time. So
yeah.
we
And
can't assume that that's going to happen.
for context, I normally wouldn't have done that. My wife said, I guess you could do it," kind of smirking. So I had
She
to show
challenged
her
you.
I had to show her that I could do it. But this cycle it went a lot better, and a uh I ended with a better set at the 2. So we went 10 8 6 4 2. I just hit a grade 2, so it worked.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um
Exactly.
so yeah, okay, so that leads into, is a 1RM a good indicator of strength? And I would say yes and no.
Hmm.
Um because
You
it kind
need
of depends on context.
context.
Like,
You need
obviously, if someone
context.
has a better 1RM, I mean, technically they're stronger. But
Yeah.
in terms of training and we're trying to get stronger, maybe a 3RM is better, or maybe a 5RM is a better indicator.
Hmm.
But the idea of it more so is like, I have a note here. Like, if you're in a competition and you hit a 1RM snatch, or you hit a 1RM snatch, and let's just say it's 250, and then you can't repeat it for another year. Like,
Yeah.
is that actually a realistic number, or did you actually really improve, or was your adrenaline going and you had
Hmm.
the perfect meal because your diet was finally in place for a few weeks leading to the competition, and just everything went right, but that was your maximum, and now you're always chasing it and you can't
Hmm.
repeat it. Well, that's not a good indicator. Like, then 250 isn't isn't probably a great number to be leaning on, versus like you hit 225 every day in the gym and then
Hmm.
you jump to 250 and you can't hit it. Well,
Yeah.
maybe it's time to start making that 225 to 230, and then the 230 to make that look like the 240. and so on.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, context is important. So, like, if we think about CrossFitters competing, you do need to have 1 RM maximums that you're using as a reference point
Hmm.
for structural balance, for figuring out discrepancies in power and speed, for ensuring that you're around the numbers that you need to be at certain levels of the competition. So, like, if you never maxed your bench press, but you want to go to semifinals, like, well, we probably should, because you probably need to be benching over 300 pounds as a male. So if you're like benching 250, then that's a problem. So we do want to use them as a tool to help guide decision making. But to your point, it's a tool and a reference point, but it's not like the target necessarily. Maybe for some people, it's more important because it's more of a limitation for them in their progress
Hmm.
than it is for someone else. But it's yeah, I think I'm trying
I
to
think
think
there's
of
a better question might be, is a 1 RM a good indicator of strength expression in CrossFit? Because it needs to be wider,
uh
broader.
yeah. Well, I think in the sport you're tested more at submaximal loads.
Yeah.
Like like how heavy of a thruster can you lift after 15 minutes of really high effort work, or can you
Heavy grace.
do a yeah or doing a CrossFit total as the third or fourth event of a weekend competition, or doing a clean and jerk max as the 10th event of a competition, or doing a snatch max as the fifth event of a competition. So there's the 1 RM is valuable. It has application to the competitor, but you don't want to like think that that's the end all be all. You need to also look at like, what are my capacities underneath the ceiling, because that's more I'm going to say more prized, but more higher valued ticket than 1 RM strength in the sport, like a 3 RM snatch under
Mhm.
fatigue, or a 2 RM front squat after doing something like so sub maximal strength. I don't want to just keep blabbering, but that's where there's a difference between this and a more traditional strength sport. Like, you're not tested as often as a 1 RM, so you don't need to lose sleep over it.
Mhm. You got to just raise the minimum.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
All right. Now we're moving just deep into minimums. I got another note from
Why
from
I
Sam
almost already
Ford.
said this.
Yeah. One of my main pillars for training, whether the client is an athlete or not, is focusing on their minimums to raise their maximums. Simply said, instead of trying to constantly raise their ceiling, I focus instead on raising their ground floor. You might have said it word for word. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, then you have some good examples of what a minimum is.
Mhm.
Um, which you said, objectively speaking, minimums lie between 80 and 85% of a max lift. So if your max snatch is 100 pounds, 80 to 85 pounds would
Yeah.
be a great minimum to hit on a regular basis. And I said
Yeah.
it maybe, I put a note like maybe even higher,
Mhm.
depending
Yeah.
on the
100%.
movement or the individual. Um, and then you could maybe argue that, well, then their true maximum might be even higher now, but you're just
Yeah.
trying to raise that, that quick single, like build to a
Yeah.
tough 10, 15 minutes, and you can hit this number. And now
Mhm.
it's 83% of your 1 RM. You hit that 3 times, and now
Yep.
3 more times. And this is like no misses. You're
Yeah.
actually going and you're hitting it, you're expressing it. So
Yep.
that, I guess, that could be a really good framework for someone now, is like, how often in your training are you building up to a tough set, whether it's in a workout or, in preparation for some other lift, maybe just say, like, start doing your math. How close am I to 80? And,
Yeah.
or if maybe I'm at 92 and I'm doing really well, and maybe you will hit a new PR soon.
Yeah. Well, I'd say the first goal is making the lifts more crisp and smooth. It's like a really good indirect measure of performance, especially when I think about like a CrossFit athlete, is how does a 90% snatch look? Like, is
Mm.
it again, I'll just use you because you're a really good lifter. Like if we had a video of you lifting 70%, 80%, 90%, 95%, it would look really, even 100%. You look at your max, like it looks very similar. There's very minimal deviation in execution, positions. There's no compensation, which is great. So like that's what people need to be doing primarily, or not primarily, but as their primary target with lifting in general, is I need to make those submaximal lifts look better positions, better bracing, just better lifts first. Then as you get better at lifting at 80-85%, like the positions are just better, you're in theory raising that ground floor a little bit more. And now it's going to be, 90% is what you're trying to improve. 90% you're trying to make look better. And then 95%. And then at that point, you probably have a new PR in the tank. So
yeah,
that's what you're trying. And you're right. If somebody is not as strong or less trained, then it could be up to 95% of their 1RM that they're working on making better before just trying to lift a heavier load. And I do that a lot with my female athletes, especially with their weightlifting. Is I'm trying to make them move better and more consistent at submaximal loads with good practice and good exposure, and then building their base strength with squatting, deadlifting, all those things. And when the opportunity presents itself, they usually PR or hit a new maximum. And so it's very simple, but that's one of the best ways of approaching the development of strength expression activities.
Yeah. Yeah. So you kind of stole the thunder for the next part, but having strong, consistent percentages, raising your minimums, I would say have two really good portions, which you touched on a lot now, is the training part. You get to widen the base or raise the floor so that you could potentially hit a better 1RM and just be stronger, accumulate good reps. The second part, which I try and explain to people why it's important and what I've taken from it is similar to pacing in your running. Just knowing your minimums and knowing how comfortable you are with that 80 and 90% and knowing you've hit it under fatigue, it makes you like more confident in the competition, better, like your coach isn't out on the floor with you most of the time and you got to make this decision, but it. It's like, and you gave a good example in one of the last podcasts was, when a games level athlete jumps up on the rings, they're not thinking of their cues, necessarily. They're just jumping up on the rings and doing the rep and thinking about what's next. Whereas same thing, they just know like, oh, I feel pretty good. Like I just hit 280. I've got 90 seconds left. I'm putting 291 on the bar. Like I can't do that. They're not doing the math or thinking or whatever. So it's great for training and great for competing. I think it's like you're pacing. You just got to know these numbers and know, how you feel with them.
Yeah. Right. One note on the training piece you mentioned. As that 80-85% gets smoother, more consistent, less jerky, you're able to lift that load more consistently and loads above it, which in the long term, if you're wanting to get stronger, back to progressive overload, that's one way in which we maximize that training principle. Is you're making what was once challenging and not that efficient less challenging, more efficient, which is just, it's raising the average loading you can handle and you can recover well from it. And so if you look at that over a 12-month period, say in the first quarter of the year, your average loading was 150 pounds. I'm just throwing some numbers out there. And then in the second quarter, it's 160. In the third quarter, it's 170. In the fourth quarter, it's like 190. It's like, well, by the end of that year, you've gotten substantially stronger because you look at your squatting averages over those quarters and you've kind of steadily raised like what your training loading is, which is great. That's how you get stronger. So that's another added benefit that this idea and approach in training has, is it just kind of raises what your system can tolerate. And that's what builds lean mass. That's what builds long-term strength. That's what just builds better performance, especially inside of CrossFit. So that's an add-on to what you were
Yeah.
outlining there.
Okay, so we're probably going to hit on some of the same things again, but some other notes that you've had from the course. Importance of minimums. One is
Mm-hmm.
building confidence when lifting.
Yeah,
We
which you
talked
just
about that.
mentioned.
Yeah.
Super important.
Collecting wins through practice, which again we've touched on, but you're hitting better lifts more often and missing less.
Yeah, real
Greater
quick on that.
consistency. Go ahead.
That's super important, especially with anything. Unless it's a really, let's say, like you're learning how to do a handstand, a press to handstand, or you're doing like a handstand, any type of like hand balancing activity where
Failing
it's
helps
less
you learn.
cost. Yeah, it's less costly to fall or mess up, not like fall on your face, but you know what I mean. Like
Yeah.
it's okay to with body weight exercises to miss and make little mistakes because the loading is really low. It's just your body weight. The intensity, I guess you could say, also is really low. So there's more room for error. But when you have like an external load with snatching or clean and jerking, the the stakes are a lot higher, and you actually don't want to fail that often because you'll start patterning this fail in your brain, and we don't want that. So with weightlifting in particular, I try to keep people shy of failing because if you're always hitting your reps and you're never failing, like if you can't if it's hard for you to think back to the time you've last failed to lift, that's great because you're gonna have a lot of confidence when you go lift next. Doesn't mean you won't fail
Mm-hmm.
because you might, but having that little extra confidence, especially inside of a chaotic environment like a competition or a qualifier, your potential for execution is going to be much greater than the person who they failed a few like 4 days ago. They feel uncertain about their snatch. High stress, high intensity is not going to help you perform when you have
Yeah.
that present in your mind. So this is also why I'm a big stickler with my clients on like no fails. It doesn't work out perfect all the time, but I try to help them learn like it's not helpful to miss lifts. So, and if you are missing lifts, either most times it's just too heavy. We got to go lighter, and or you need to rest more between sets.
Yeah.
So you got to, and I get to add another point to that. When you're making lifts consistently, you're reinforcing that you can do this. You're feeling good about the lifts. You feel like you're succeeding. You're collecting wins, which is super important because training is a long-term process. It can be challenging, and you got to feel like you're walking away with some success each session, each week. And so, hitting good lifts with all of your weightlifting is a great way of building that.
Yeah. It reminded me of like when I'm also explaining this to people is if you have to remove yourself, you have to like, remove yourself from your body and look at yourself as another person. Like if you saw someone in the gym week to week, always trying to push for, a
Yeah.
heavy load and always missing, you would be in your head being like, dude, why is this guy or why is this girl, why is this idiot just do, like, why don't they just
Yeah.
do a little bit less weight?
Yeah.
And it's hard to look at yourself and say that.
Yeah.
Even if it's not as often as every week, but it's still hard to say that. So you got to kind of
Yeah.
give yourself advice that you would give to others. And
Mm-hmm.
the greater consistency in training is the next piece, which is ties hand in hand because you want consistent makes and you want to learn. And and some people are like, they get stuck where it's like, hey, I'm hitting 105 on my snatch and I can hit it, but the 110 scares me and I might miss it. So they don't go to it. You can't think of it as you're scared of the 110. You just have to think of it as you have a great opportunity to hit a perfect rep at 105 and learn. And like, that's the win. It's not a loss that you didn't hit the 110. You have to
Mm-hmm.
take it as the win and be like that. I did this because I performed it perfectly and it actually got me closer, which it is getting you closer to your goal because again, there's really not that much difference in weight. But as soon as you miss it, like you said, your brain it remembers that miss and it remembers what you did. It's like the person who, they hit the snatch and then they go to their knee,
Yeah.
and then they can stand up and then all of a sudden they do that, like, 10 times over the next 6 months.
Yeah.
Like, you got to stop that. Like, it can never happen again.
Yeah.
And it just gets in there, it creeps in. So you can't just don't let that happen. And then the final one was you recover faster because you're not doing as much load and you're performing it better. And you're learning how to recover faster because you're accumulating wins, having better consistency, and building confidence. It's kind of
and misses are costly. They take energy. They don't, just because you miss doesn't mean it doesn't count. You're using energy. It means you're straining or you're working hard. So there's a physiological cost to that, and that adds up. Like that was probably something that, if I look back at like my training when I was trying to really train, I would push my snatch too much because I wanted it to be more, and I would miss too much in the week, month. That each month I had too many misses. Towards the end, like that last year, I got better because it was just my ego, and that's mainly what it is. People they want to lift more, so they try to push the pace of it, but you have to contain your ego and make sure you can keep hitting good lifts and you can recover really well. So you can keep practicing, because that's the way you're gonna really move that needle. Is you just have to accumulate a lot of great reps. So accumulating great reps in training will just allow you to recover a lot faster, so you can do more of it.
Yeah. And like you said, the straining of the failed rep. I mean, anytime you're failing a rep, you're more likely you're at more risk or more prone to injury as well.
That too,
you miss that snatch behind and you hold on too long. It's not the most dangerous thing, but it's more dangerous than hitting a perfect rep.
Yeah. I almost never miss any lift now. Like I still push myself with my strength training, but like on Monday, I did that deadlift 480, which for me was a good lift. And that was really hard, but I was like, I'm good. I don't need to try 500 because it'll get sloppy. Could I do it? Maybe, but it's just not worth it. Like at what cost? Because I might, who knows, it could tear something, or I miss it. And then I really drain myself because I had to really push myself to do it. How does that impact the rest of my training week? So that's I think that's part of its maturity too. I think it takes time to recognize, like, I need to give up some short-term gratification for some long-term, gains.
Yeah. Funny enough, I've maybe one of the few people I've never missed a lift. So we'll move on. All right. So Sam has 3 good tips on how to raise minimums. Have I told you the Kobe Bryant story?
Maybe
the rim. One day he had missed a bunch of threes in a game, and they immediately asked him, like, what's up? What's wrong with your shot? Like, why were you off tonight? He said, I wasn't off. Like, my shot's on. They need to check the regulation, the rim, and something's not right. And he just walked off.
And did they check it? And if something was off,
I don't. It could have been. I don't remember, but
I've heard that.
I remember that.
Yeah, that sounds about right though.
That's Mamba mentality.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. How to raise minimums. The first one, movement efficiency. People might be turning off the podcast now because we've said it so many times, but the ability to lift a load at full speed using less energy than an inefficient counterpart. Okay.
It could be like a competitor.
Yeah. Or someone else.
Anyone else.
Everyone compared to me as an inefficient counterpart.
That's what you should start.
That's what I'll just start. Like, yeah,
you're an inefficient counterpart.
Hello, inefficient counterpart. You really can't screw it up. It's a kind of a tongue twister because you could really look dumb if inefficient. All right, so movement efficiency. The better you move, like we said, you want the reps to look better. If you have poor overhead mobility and you improved it, then your reps will look better at the same weight, and that's kind of where we're going with that. So super important. The next one ties into it. Perception of effort. So how easy does it feel? How easy do you think it feels? The sense of effort associated with lifting the load. So, and you can kind of tie it into anything, but like, let's just say you're doing a deadlift at 405 and it felt so smooth and easy. And now you're thinking all the time, like, dude, that's nothing. Like, I can go do that. Your confidence is higher. You've had a bunch of wins and now it's, You might not even be that much stronger, but it just
Mm-hmm.
feels that much better.
Yep.
And then you added one: training, time, and getting stronger. So
Yeah.
it's the
The
long
more,
game, long game.
yeah. Yeah. Simple things. Yeah. But movement efficiency, especially inside the sport of CrossFit, your goal year over year is to move better, to perform the movements with more ease, just better positions. That's you can't really get around that. And perception of effort, as your movement efficiency improves, the cost to perform the work goes down. And so you perceive less effort when you have to do a muscle up or a snatch. And you multiply that over 100 reps, it makes a big difference in performance. So you start with efficiency, you work on getting better, you work on moving better, you work on executing your repetitions with more ease. And then you start to sense that change psychologically. That changes your confidence. It changes the way you view the lifts. And then when you go perform, you think about them a little bit differently. They feel more. You feel more confident, more capable. And that actually, for me, that was so. For initially, I would say the thruster was a challenging movement for me because I was tight and my front rack position wasn't great. And then after about a good 3 years of training, my positions had gotten a lot better. My front rack was a lot better. And a lot of that was all of my front squatting I did with a full grip on the bar. And that really helped me improve my front rack position. And by that 3rd year mark, I started feeling a lot more confident with thrusters where I didn't dread them as much because my positions were a lot better. I could breathe more and I could work at a higher rate when doing them. So that might be something you notice now where there are certain movements when you think of it, it like makes you cringe. You're like, I don't really like that movement. And usually it's because you're not in a great position. It's hard to breathe. It's hard to perform work there. And so if you start making a conscious effort to improve your positions to the best of your ability and really work on trying to make that a position that you have more freedom over, your sense of ease is going to improve, which will influence your confidence with that movement when you go compete or perform. So that's a great way of thinking about minimums and improving them.
Yeah, because you're kind of posing it. It doesn't have to be just be like the 1 RM.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
the principle could be the burpee and the thruster.
Yeah.
Especially with the perception of effort and how
Hmm.
tied you are to it, and then the movement
Yeah.
efficiency. So yeah, kind
I mean, it's
it
the
really
same thing
ties in.
with endurance training too. I mean, you're
Yeah.
trying to raise your lactate threshold higher, closer to critical power or your critical speed with running. And part of the way you do that, other than training, there isn't a movement efficiency economy component. So uh, if your economy of movement is improving as you run, that's going to
Hmm.
influence how quickly or how much oxygen you're going to use, which is going to influence your lactate threshold. So this idea of raising minimums, it goes to all aspects of performance and physical activity. So it's not just unique to weightlifting or CrossFit, but it's present in anything physically related.
Okay, so the last note I made, I was just thinking when I was kind of sifting through the notes and stuff, was that the 1 RM is closer to chaos and your minimum is more under control, even though hopefully they're close together. And you can think of it as like a skill. If you did a muscle up and it looked wild, and there's a lot of there's a chance you're going to fall through the rings, there's a chance you're going to miss it, you miss the dip. But
Hmm.
if or let's just say that was like your eighth muscle up of the set, but if
Hmm.
you only did the set of 5 and they all looked perfect, you have more control. And that's kind of where we were going with the expression. Like, you want to be able to own the lift and know
Hmm.
it was you, because introducing the chaos is going to introduce a higher chance of you failing. So
Yeah.
you're going to now risk it, and sometimes you
Hmm.
might need to. But if you're going to risk it and you fail, then like you said, you know we're back to where we were talking about. The mislift is not good. It's
Yeah.
cancerous. It's going to start bleeding into your brain.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, I think in isolation, a 1 RM does introduce a lot of chaos because you are going to a maximum. So there's uncertainty
Hmm.
around how you're going to handle it, what you're going to do, how your body's going to compensate to try to lift it. So the goal over time is as you raise your minimum and it's getting closer and closer and closer to your ceiling, where your movement integrity is getting better and better and better at higher loads, the 1RM becomes less chaotic because you have it ingrained in your system how to do this lift really, really well. Like you watch any Olympic weightlifter at the actual Olympics going for PRs, and it, like you look at their second lift and it's like, wow, that was really good. And it was, 7 kilos under their PR. Then they do a third lift, they go for the PR, and it looks almost exactly the same. It's like they built in the scaffolding, efficiency, volume, practice. So there isn't this big void that they have to traverse when it comes to going for a maximum. But if you look at somebody who's less trained, it does look night and day from when they're at 95% until they go to 100%. So that's, and one story I have for that, because this was, I'll never forget, this is super fascinating to me. So this would have been, what year would have this been? 2015? No. It would have been like 2014. So I think 2014, friends of mine were on NorCal CrossFit's games team. And so I would drive over on the weekends. I'd go train with them. And so it was like a Saturday morning, and Jason Khalipa was there, Garrett Fisher, and they were training for the games as individuals. And I was training with my friends who were on the team. And it was like 7 a.m, and they were front squatting a heavy double. And Garrett went first, and his first rep was like perfect. It was like, he had such great positions. Like, wow, that is so strong. That is so tight. And he goes for a second rep, and he gets out of the hole, and he just stops, and he failed. But the way he failed, you thought he could have grinded it. Like if he would have like flexed his back a little bit and kind of pushed it up, he could have made it. And I was like, wow, why couldn't he grind for that more? And then Jason goes next. Jason does his first rep. It's a little bit rounded, but like he does it pretty easily because his legs are strong. He goes for the second rep. He gets out of the hole, same spot as Garrett. And then right at that point, he starts flexing and rounding and like pushes the bar up almost with his arms. He gets out of the hole. He doesn't rack one side, the other side falls. Like the bar fell out. It was really funny. But it was just a great example of like really tight movement constraint where Garrett wouldn't allow his brain wouldn't allow him to get into a position where he'd be really compromised with maximal loading. And that's a nice inbuilt governor because it'll keep him safe. There are times though that you want to be able to maybe push beyond that, but that's another conversation. And then Jason has an alternative example where he was very grindy and just kind of would like muscle it, and you could just see it visually pan out. And I would, in my opinion, Garrett's approach was a much better approach from a competitive performance standpoint, or not competitive, but performance standpoint, because he's not going to put himself in a position where injury risk can occur to a much greater degree, or he's starting to learn or pattern these really poor positions. And so that was I'll never forget that, because I was just like, I couldn't believe the discrepancy because he had the strength. His brain just like stopped because he just couldn't, his brain wouldn't allow himself to get real out of position to try to lift the load. So that's where you want to be with your strength. Is like you want your positions to be real tight and solid when you are at your maximums. You don't want to be.
You want to hold yourself to a high standard.
Yes,
because it's like anything. If you let the standard fall a little bit, it just immediately bleeds to so many other areas. You start smoking one cigarette a day, all of a sudden you're four deep before lunch, and and you didn't want to. If you choose to do that, that's fine. But if you didn't want to do it, then it just starts getting everywhere. And then what's next? Then you're taking creatine.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. That was a great story. Yeah, I think that's good because they're both at the top level, and both. I mean,
they were.
Jason was better, but Garrett came in quick, did really well. He could always, and kind of was hanging with top dogs from the start, and that's probably a big reason why.
Yeah, he moved really,
it might have
really
came
well
from other sports because I know he played baseball and
Yep.
I'm sure, I know his
He's
whole family was
athletic.
kind of competitive. So yeah, they got that,
Yeah.
they got that sport
Yeah.
background.
Yeah, he moved really,
Okay.
really well, which is very
Yeah.
important.
Yeah. I think that was a great little cap. We didn't even have that in the notes, guys. He just thought of that. Awesome. Minimums over maximums. I'm excited to get a
The
really cool
path to
thumbnail for this one.
excellence.
The path to excellence. Yeah, that's a good thing. Yeah, that'll be the subheading.
Yeah. Hey, if Bruce Lee was alive, he'd be like, "Oh yeah, 100%. It's all about minimums over maximums."
Oh yeah.
He'd have
Shock
something more
therapy.
like esoteric to say, but
Yeah.
path to excellence.
Something about a cup of water and minimally fill it.
Yeah.
So we'll come up with something soon, guys. All right, that was great. I think hopefully everyone learned something good from this podcast. Remember, we have Fitness Over 40. If you're still listening, with Coach Henry, it's a great little segment about training for life, and just good principles in general, especially if you're over the age of 30, even though it's over 40. But you got to prepare for your 40s.
Mhm.
And soon we're gonna be having some of our coaches on, talking about who they work with, their coaching background, and maybe you guys will enjoy that. So stay on the lookout. We appreciate all the listens, the likes, the subscribes. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments, and we appreciate you guys for listening today.